Strength is a glorified quality in our society. We're told that being strong is good, strong is what you should strive for. But for Black women, the word strong has been used time and time again to trivialize pain. It also positions them as being able to face anything without any support. So today I'm talking about the strong Black woman trope and why, although seemingly positive, it can still rob Black women of their full humanity. I mean, when you think of the phrase strong Black woman, I bet your mind goes to the image of that single mother doing it all. A superhuman who puts up with all the bullshit without flinching. Scratch a little deeper and you'll see that there's a grimmer message behind it all. In reality, that phrase implies that the strong Black woman cares for everyone else's needs before her own and does it all without crying or relying on anyone's help. Now don't get me wrong, Black women have strength. Let's not get it twisted. In fact, we're even socialized to be strong and self-sufficient in order to deal with the world. It helps us be resilient and stand tall in the face of difficult circumstances. But the idea of the strong Black woman does have its drawbacks. It makes the challenges Black women face go unmentioned because through that stereotype, we're pigeonholed as strong providers who must shoulder other people's burdens with no place for our own. It's also been used to dehumanize Black women and actually use their strength against them. And again, as with most things I talk about on here, that was done by design. The strong Black woman stereotype is more than just a cultural trope. Not only does it hold Black women to an unrealistic and unachievable standard, it also feeds on Black women's resilience and, in a way, uses their strength against them. Our society has used it to applaud Black women for keeping their problems and emotions in check, all the while knocking them down and exploiting their labor. Yes, although today this superhuman strength narrative is used to talk about Black women's perseverance and empowerment, which is a problem in and of itself, but I'll get to that later, it was first used during slavery to justify their enslavement. It actually partially derived from the Mammy Trope, which pushed the idea that Black women were actually happy to be enslaved and enjoyed serving their masters and mistresses. This in turn allowed slave owners to feel less guilty about what they were doing. And thus, Black women not only absorbed all the physical and emotional labor from their families, but also that of the white families they worked for. What's more, this false narrative that Black enslaved women were strong enough to endure any pain was used to justify the violence committed against them. Later on, in the aftermath of slavery, Black families actually socialized girls to grow up to be strong Black women as a survival response not only to trauma, but also the oppression that they still faced. Not only was it a necessity for survival, it also counteracted other negative stereotypes like the Mammy or the Jezebel, which I'll get into in other videos. So the strong Black woman narrative was further developed to highlight positive attributes and used by Black women to simply try to exist in a climate of systemic oppression. And this is something that we still see today. Although chattel slavery is no longer a thing, Black women still have to deal with racism, sexism, etc., and so use the superwoman concept as a survival mechanism. However, this strong Black woman role is both an asset and a vulnerability, but I'll get more into that in part 3. The strong Black woman trope is a double-edged sword. While Black women are acclaimed for their strength in the face of adversity, this leaves little room for them to actually show any sign of weakness. This trope overshadows internal hardships Black women may face, and regardless of what they're going through, it pushes them to maintain an image of perfection and strength. Although historically the superwoman concept gave Black women the tools needed to navigate systemic oppression, it also sent the message that they not be a liability, and this stuck. Society tells the Black woman that despite continued exploitation and abuse, she must keep her head held high and push that pain down because it will only make her stronger. But in this context, society isn't holding itself accountable for the cause behind the Black woman's strength. It calls on Black women to be problem solvers and caretakers for everyone in their lives, all the while never bothering with their pain. Not only does this create an impossible standard for young Black girls, but many Black women then feel pressured to act like superwomen in the face of chronic racial discrimination and gender-based oppression. And this might explain why Black women disproportionately experience higher rates of adverse health conditions, as well as untreated psychological conditions like anxiety or depression. By being made to feel as though you need to excel and overachieve in all situations on your own, it leaves very little room for self-care. This stereotype psychologically conditions the Black woman into believing that her emotions, her humanity is invalid, yet at the same time it exploits her labor and her victories. And when you're conditioned into believing that any sign of emotion is weakness, you're also less likely to seek mental help. It's a vicious cycle because the stigma towards asking for help cultivates silent perseverance from Black women, which is then passed down to younger generations. And the fact that Black women are less likely to be believed when they do try and go get help definitely plays a part in that. Black women are often perceived to possess superhuman strength, and this also extends to the medical field. On the other hand, this stereotype also led way to another, which is that strong black women aren't vulnerable enough to date. They're seen as too strong or too independent to be feminine partners. But the problem here isn't how black women cope with discrimination, but rather the oppressive systems that led way to that discrimination in the first place. Now, I'm not saying that black women can't be strong. They can, and they have been. Historically speaking, black women have done what they needed to do to survive, but their strength is not an invitation for discrimination from others. This stereotype is used as an excuse to overlook the violence and discrimination black women face, and as with all the other stereotypes I mentioned in a previous video, it robs them of their humanity. Ultimately, I don't think we should throw the concept of the strong black woman out entirely, but when you keep focusing on the powerhouse, you never think about the power source. So perhaps it's time we throw out parts of that trope, and perhaps it's just about time we say no and redefine what it means to be strong.